Hello, everybody. We're going to be starting this course with the most classic graph you're going to see in economics, supply and demand. We're going to start with demand, then we're going to move into supply, and then we're going to combine the two and talk about equilibrium. So let's dive into demand. These are the topics that we're going to be discussing, kind of introduction of markets, what is a demand curve, we're going to define the law of demand, we're going to look at market demand, we're going to look at changes of demand, different what I call non-price determinants of demand, and we're going to go through all these different ones. Okay, so markets and prices. First up, markets. Markets, in a simpler definition than what you can read there, simply whenever a buyer and seller interact. This can be a physical location like a Walmart or a farmer's market, or this can be an online platform like Amazon. Both or all three really are considered markets. In Walmart, it's the seller's going to be Walmart Corporation, so you're not going to necessarily be interacting with the producer directly. You're going to be buying from an employee that then sends money to the corporation. In a farmer's market, you may actually be able to interact with the producer of whatever good you're buying. Some of us been to those kind of art fairs and bought pieces of art from different artists. You're dealing with the producer, the artist, directly. Now, Amazon, sometimes you're buying from Amazon Corporation, sometimes you're buying from individual sellers that are selling through Amazon. And in both cases, though, you're not physically in front of the producer buying the good or the service. You're simply buying off a website. But both places, both physical and virtual, by the definition that we use in economics, is a market. So a market is just a market is just where buyers and sellers interact, whether it be physical location or whether it be virtual, or interacting from across the world. Okay, so how trade happens in a market: the buyer sees the price that the seller wants, and they make a decision. Is that price too high? They don't want to buy it. Is it just right and they're going to buy exactly what they need, or is it cheap and they're going to buy extra? That's essentially how a market works. It's not one telling the other what they should do or what they need to take. Both are making a decision. Both are making a decision, and both are going to respond to those decisions. And then each buyer and seller can then respond accordingly to the decisions that the other made. One common misconception that I get from students is that, well, sellers really set the price, right? Because they're the ones that slap it up there. But that's not really the case. We want to think that these corporate fat cats are the ones that are just wanting to pad their bank accounts. And I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen occasionally, but really, even those corporate fat cats have to sit back and say, okay, what is the market willing to buy my product for? So sellers do not set the price. So if sellers don't set the price, who does? Is it the buyers? Buyers don't set the price either. Individual buyers, that is. So if someone tries to walk into a business and tells the store owner what they should sell their product for, they're going to get laughed out of there. So buyers don't set the prices either. So what really sets the prices? It's the interaction between the buyers and sellers in the market, each sending a signal back and forth. Think about it as you're driving by a gas station and you see the gas, and let's say you need gas. So you see the price, you see down the road, it's a little bit cheaper. You pass that first gas station and you go to the cheaper gas station and begin to pump your gas. You've made a decision based off the two prices in your best interest. You've sent a signal to that first gas station that says, hey, maybe your gas is too high. So you can, if you want more customers, lower the gas price a little bit. And then that seller gets to react to that signal and decide whether it's advantageous for them to drop it or keep it the same. But this is essentially how a market works. It's many buyers and many sellers interacting with each other, making decisions. Right? We have competitions on the seller side, you have competition on the buyer side. All these interactions essentially set the prices. Okay, so before we dive too deep into the demand curve and all the interactions we're going to have with that, one thing to keep in mind: demand versus supply, demand's going to be much easier to grasp. Everyone, no matter what your income level is, whether you're Elon Musk or whether you're scraping by, everyone's in demand for something. Everyone needs to buy food, toilet paper, milk, right? So everyone's been in demand. So as we go through these next several slides, as we move through these concepts, these are going to be easier to grasp because, again, we've all been there. So that being stated, let's move into the demand curve and the law of demand. The law of demand, simply stated, is as prices rise, demand falls. And as prices fall, demand rises. That's it. It's our interaction with the market. Every time you see a sale and something is, when you see something on sale, you sit back and say, hey, we can buy more of that now because the prices have dropped. Let's go ahead and take advantage of these low prices. We've all been there when we've seen gas prices go up. Maybe you're used to filling up half a tank. You see the price gets jacked up all of a sudden, and you think, well, I still have a tank. I could probably go a little longer. Your demand for gas went down. Eventually, you're still going to buy gasoline, right? But you've slowed how often you're going to be demanding, and maybe you decide, hey, I'm not going to drive as many places to try to conserve gas. So your demand for gas does go down because the prices are high. But all of a sudden, you wake up one morning and gas is 20 cents cheaper. A lot of times what do? We go buy more gas because we want to take advantage of low prices. That's the law of demand. When prices go high, demand goes low. When prices go low, demand goes high. We call this an inverse relationship. One side does the opposite of the other. Okay, first we have what we call a demand schedule. This is simply a chart that is a representation of the law of demand. As you can see here, when the price of whatever good this is at 16, we have a quantity demanded at 1. As the price begins to go down, right? We're at 4. Quantity demand is going to be 9. This is what we call that inverse relationship. As one does one thing, the other does the opposite. Okay, so from here, we're going to take our demand schedule and we're going to begin to create our demand curve. Now, this chart apparently represents demand for movies. Okay, so at $16, you might choose to go alone, right? At $13, you're going to choose maybe, hey, invite a date, a couple of friends, right? Now demand is going to begin to go up. You might even pay for their ticket at $13, right? So, whatever your reasoning is, though, as price is high, quantity is low. As the price begins to drop, quantity demanded begins to rise. And so what we see here is each one of these levels is going to be part of our graph. And you just simply plot your quantity here to here, and you plot your price from here to there. So at $16, we have a quantity of 1, and we just plot our dot there. And we do this at every single level that we have on our chart. And then we just simply draw our demand curve. This is where we get our demand curve. So you can take a demand curve and you can create a demand schedule. You can take a demand schedule and you can create a demand curve. They are simply a representation of each other. Okay, demand curves are downward sloping. Okay, this is that inverse relationship. So if you're presented with a supply and demand curve, the demand curve will always slope down and to the right, and a supply curve will slope up and to the right. Law of demand, marginal benefit, purchasing power, and substitutes. This is where we're going to be getting into people's reaction to, or individuals' reaction to the law of demand. Okay, so there's going to be 3 reasons why the demand curve slopes downward. Why do we have this inverse relationship? It's really what we're saying. Why do we have this inverse relationship? First up is going to be the income effect. Then we have diminishing marginal utility. And then we have what we call the substitute effect. Okay, so first up, income effect. Essentially, what we're saying here is that when the price goes up or goes down, you're going to increase or you're going to decrease your purchasing power. So in this example here, the price per pizza slices has gone down. Right, in this picture, is 50% off, so that means your purchasing power has gone up. That's why you have this little example here. That's why your price of pizza has gone down, arrow's going down, and purchasing power has gone up. And there you have your arrow pointing up. That's all we mean by income effect. Essentially, your purchasing power is either rising or lowering, right? So there we go. They're moving. Okay, so income effect. So here's a long definition of income effect, but just like we've just stated, all we're really talking about is when the prices go up, your purchasing power has gone down. When the prices go down, your purchasing power has gone up, and people are going to respond to that. We're all dealing with inflation right now. Thankfully, it's been going down in the past few months, but it's still higher. Inflation is still affecting prices of things that we've been buying on a regular basis. So we've all felt it, right? All of a sudden, where your basket of goods, you may have, your basket half filled. All of a sudden at Walmart, you're looking down and you can see all the way down the floor, and you're still paying $100 for that basket of goods. Our purchasing power has essentially gone down because inflation has been high. That's all we're talking about. As things become cheaper, all of a sudden our purchasing power begins to rise. That's the income effect. So as prices drop, your purchasing power increases and allows you to consume a higher quantity, thus helps give the demand curve its downward sloping line. Okay, reason number 2 for that downward sloping line is the diminishing marginal utility. Okay, this essentially is stating that as you begin to buy more of something, you become less satisfied with it, or it loses its utility in your life. It loses its importance. Okay, kind of a classic example of this is the pizza. So we've all been to CC's. We've all been to that buffet, and you get in line, you get your plate, you go down, you get your favorite flavors or your favorite type of pizza rather, and you go and you sit down and you have 3 or 4 slices and you eat them and you feel, and those first few slices, it's great. You absolutely love it. But what do we all do after that? Are we done? No, it's a buffet. It's all you can eat. We want to get our money's worth. We're going to talk about sunk cost later, but we want to get our money's worth. So we go back up, get a new plate. If you know how it works at CC's. If you don't, you bring your plate you just used, and you begin to go get more pizza. Now, you've already eaten 3 or 4. You get 3 or 4 more slices, and you begin to eat again. And this cycle may continue for a few more sections, but eventually you get down to where you start thinking, is it really worth this extra slice, or am I just trying to make sure I'm getting my money's worth, right? Those slices at the end of you going back and getting more pizzas are not nearly as satisfying as they were in the beginning. This is the premise and the idea of diminishing marginal utility. Each dollar, well, what about money, right? And I've had that question before. Okay, well, with money, the more you have, is it worth less to you? Because money stacks up in value. But if you think about it, yes, right? If I'm walking down the street and I drop $20 on the ground, I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna be digging for it. I'm gonna be looking for it. I'm gonna be, if it's in the parking lot, I'm gonna be crawling under cars for it. It's $20, right? But if I'm Elon Musk and I drop $20, if I even notice that I dropped that $20, do I think I really care much about that $20 when I'm worth billions of dollars? No, right? So again, we still have the effect of the diminishing marginal utility, even when it comes to money. To reiterate, okay, diminishing marginal utility is just the negative relation between the quantity of a good, service, or resource and the marginal utility obtained from each additional unit consumed in a given period of time. Outside of economies and in normal everyday language, the more you consume something, the less it's going to be satisfying, or the less it's going to be useful. So you're simply going to be buying less of it as you try to, or as you're acquiring more. It's not going to mean as much to you, so you're not going to buy as much. Okay, and then we have reason number 3, the substitution effect. Okay, this is the third reason why we have that downward sloping line. Essentially, again, when I mean downward sloping line, or when I say downward sloping line, what I mean is, why do we have that inverse relationship? Okay, so substitution effects. The price of pizza goes up. Do you still buy the pizza, or do you eat elsewhere? Right? Think about who's ever been to the fair before. Right? Think about that time that you've been to the fair. You go up, you're like, man, slice of pizza is 20 tickets? Oh man, but look, that hamburger over there, it's only 10 tickets. Is pizza and a hamburger a substitute of each other at the fair? Absolutely it is, right? It's also a substitute of each other in many more situations, but definitely at the fair. That's what we're talking about. If you look at the price of something is too high, and let's just say you even try to wheel and deal with the producer of it, then the person selling it behind the booth, and they're like, "Yeah, not changing my price," and you're just going to simply substitute that for something else. It could be a hamburger, it could be a funnel cake. I'm kind of sticking with the fair theme here, but that's the idea of the substitution effect. Okay, you change, and we're going to talk about different types of substitutes here in a little bit, but the substitution effect, simply put, is just when the price of one good is high, you're going to seek out a alternative to that good that produces the same outcome, maybe in a different way, right? We've been using food. What about smartphones, right? All of a sudden, let's say your cell phone breaks and you need a new cell phone. You look at the Apple iPhone, which is what I use. I use a cheap one though, but you check that out. Man, it's $1,200, $1,300, or you can get a Samsung for $800. Right? Do they virtually do the same thing? Will they make phone calls? Will they do text messaging? Will they get on the internet for you? You do your social media? Absolutely. Do they do them in different ways? A little bit, right? They have different. They do things. They function a hair different, but ultimately they're both smartphones. Okay, that's another example of substitutes. And based off price, we can then choose to go buy something else. So the demand for iPhones may go down, and then the demand for Samsungs may go up simply based off price. That's the substitution effect. Okay, now we have the market of demand. Okay, this is going to be pretty straightforward, simple math here. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so the first demand schedule that we see is for this individual. This is her demand schedule for Italian dinners. So at $15 per dinner, she's buying one. At 10, she could want to buy 3. Maybe she's going to eat that, for several days going forward. And then at 5, she's buying 5 because that's dirt cheap. So she's eating Italian every single night. Okay. And then we have another person's demand schedule. Okay. And his demand schedule states that at $15, he's buying 2. At 10, he's buying 3. And at 5, he's buying 4. So individually, here is both their demand schedules. Okay, so what we do when we want to make our market demand schedule, so in this case, our market demand schedule for Italian dinners, you just simply add up the quantities based on the price. So you have Martin's here at 2, you have Julia's here, she had 1. So at $15, the market demand will be 3 dinners. At $10, you simply add up the 3 and 3, which gives us 6 dinners for the market demand curve. And then at $5, you simply add the 4 and the 5, and that equals 9. So this is how we come up with our market demand curve, and we can see that phenomenon here. Okay, so let's see here. There we go. So now that we've added those together, let's look at what does that do to our actual demand curve. So here's a schedule. Now let's look at our demand curve. Okay, so in this case, we see the 2 individuals' demand curves here, and then once we add them together, it creates this secondary line, and that gives us our market demand curve. Okay, so a basic definition of market demand will just simply be adding up the individual demand schedules to create a new market demand schedule, and thus creating a new market demand curve. Now let's talk about change in demand. Okay, so there's 2 changes that are going to happen. Okay, so first up, what happens when the demand curve? First up, what happens on the demand curve when the price drops from $5 to $3? Okay, we call this a movement. If you see here, look real closely. I'm not sure if you're on your phone or on a computer screen, but right here, this creates a arrow going down. So what we have is movement. Erase that for us. What we have is a movement. It starts at $5, right? It drops down to $3. So what's happening to our quantity demanded? It's going up, right? We were demanding 200, whatever this is, demand for gasoline, so 200 gallons of gasoline. But at $3, right, the market demand is going to be 400 gallons of gasoline. So when it's a change in price, it's what we call a change in quantity demanded, and that's going to be what we call a movement along the demand curve. Okay, change in demand. Well, before it was a change in quantity demanded because of a change in price. Now we're going to get into change in the demand itself, and this is where we get into what we call non-price determinants. So the slideshow gives a kind of a silly example, but it makes the point as if we're hanging out at the beach and we're looking at the demand for water bottles on a beach day. So first up, what happens to the demand for water bottles on a hot day at the beach? Obviously, it's hot, it's sunny. The demand for water bottles, just imagine one of those booths sitting up there towards the back of the beach. Demand for water bottles is going to be high. Right? Is demand high because the price of water bottles went down? No, right? It's because of the environment around us, because of the hot summer day. Okay, so this phenomenon of wanting more water bottles as the day gets hotter, or just simply on a hot summer day, is going to cause what we call a shift. It's not about price; it's about the environment around us. It's a non-price determinant, and it's going to cause a shift. If you're taking notes, if you look here, the direction that this shift is happening is to the right. So if you're taking notes, a shift, an increase that's going to cause a shift will always shift to the right. Increase will always shift to the right. A decrease will always shift to the left. It doesn't matter if it's supply or demand, which I'll talk about in the next lesson. It's still going to be a shift to the right. An increase is always a shift to the right. A decrease of a non-price determinant will always be a shift to the left. Let's look at that shift to the left real quick. Now suppose on our beach day, instead of it being hot and sunny, it's a little cold, rainy, and dark, right? So instead of hanging out at the beach, people are going to leave. So what's going to happen to the demand for water bottles? It's obviously going to go down. It's not going down because of price. It's going down because of our environment. And so this would create a decrease in demand at every price level, causing a shift to the left. So we have that leftward movement because of a non-price determinant that changes the demand. In this case, the environment at the beach. So like I said before, an increase will always be a shift to the right, and a decrease will always be a shift to the left. We're going to have different reasons for this shift when we get to supply, but that's still going to hold true. A shift to the right an increase will always be a shift to the right, and a decrease will always be a shift to the left. Okay, so in these next couple of slides, just kind of reiterate what I just said. Okay, if it's an increase in quantity demanded because of the price, it's just going to be a movement down the line. You can see that right here. Okay, if it's an increase in demand because of a non-price determinant, right there for you, okay, it's going to be a shift to the right. And the opposite will be true. When price goes up, what happens to demand? Quantity demanded, it goes down, right? So we call it a movement on the demand curve. If it's a decrease in demand because of anything other than price, one of those non-price determinants, okay, we have a shift. And it's going to shift to the left. Determinants of demand. Okay, and from this point on, we're going to talk about different determinants of demand, really different non-price determinants of demand. So first up, we have income. Okay, with income being a non-price determinant, we have what we call normal goods and inferior goods. These create two different types of goods for us. Okay, with normal goods, these have a direct relationship with income. So when your income rises, your demand for normal goods will also rise. And as your income falls, you begin to try to substitute those out with cheaper alternative options. So your demand for normal goods goes down. Okay, so this little visual that represents that. Income goes up, demand for the normal good also goes up. Okay, and then when you have a decrease in your income, maybe you're laid off, they cut your hours, whatever it may be, your demand for normal goods will go down. Normal goods, an example of normal goods is going to be like, and a lot of grocery store examples are really kind of what traditionally is used when talking about normal goods and inferior goods. So, milk, everyone's going to buy milk. Toilet paper, everyone's going to buy toilet paper. So your demand for really nice toilet paper may go down, right? And you might buy, the single ply toilet paper to try to offset the cost. But your demand for it will go down. Instead of buying the 52 pack at Costco, right, you might buy the 12 pack at Walmart. So your demand for the normal toilet paper rolls went down because your income went down. And as your income goes back up, you might go to Costco and get the giant pack for twice the amount as, because you're still going to try to save a little bit per roll, but you are buying more of the good. You're demanding more of that normal good. Okay, the next we have inferior goods, and these are going to have an inverse relationship. So as our income begins to drop, we're going to buy more of this because we're substituting normal goods for these inferior goods. And kind of a classic example of that is ramen noodles, right? I remember when I was in college, broke, because I thought my first year I was going to be a full-time student, and you realize quickly you're going to run out of money pretty quick. So I began to buy lots of ramen noodles. As my income has risen over time, do I still buy ramen noodles? No, right? I buy normal goods because my income has rose. Okay, rice is, I guess, the example that they want to use here. So, to show that relationship, just like we did with normal good, as your income begins to rise, your demand for these goods begins to drop. Another great example, I remember growing up when my dad is in construction. He's an electrician, so I remember when things were rough, we were eating things like Vienna sausages, Spam, ramen noodles, right? But then, as his income began to rise, all of a sudden we're buying more chicken and ground beef, right? Those normal goods there. Okay, and then on the opposite end of that, as the income began to go down, your demand for inferior goods begins to rise. This is the phenomenon between inferior goods and normal goods. Okay, so the next round of the determinants of demand, we're going to talk about taste and preferences, numbers of buyers, and the expectations of future prices. So taste and preferences. So taste and preferences, if there's an increase in preference for a good, it's going to increase the number of buyers. If there's a decrease in the number or in the preference of a good, it's going to shift to the left, causing a decrease in demand for this good. A good example of that will be, let's say that there's an article that says that drinking a glass of orange juice every single day lowers cholesterol. That's going to cause more people to say, hey, that's healthy for you. I want more orange juice because I want to lower my cholesterol. Their preference for orange juice has now gone up, so they have an increase in preference, so it's going to cause a shift to the right. Again, this is a non-price determinant. It's nothing to do with price. It's all about the perceived health benefits of the orange juice, true or not. And they're going to have a shift to the right in demand for orange juice. Now, let's say 6 months later, they go, oh, we're going to retract that, and actually orange juice makes you live 2 years less if you drink a glass of orange juice a day, right? What's going to happen to the demand? It's obviously going to go down. It's going to cause a shift to the left. This would be an example. Again, this is an example of change in taste and preferences. In this example, it's really more based off the media, and people can change their taste and preferences for all sorts of reasons. But the phenomenon will be the same. An increase in preference causes a shift to the right, an increase, and a decrease in preference will cause a shift to the left, a decrease in demand. Number of buyers, very, very, very straightforward. Okay, if you're in a town and all of a sudden your town's population drops overnight, let's say in the middle of the night, people just move and leave, what's going to happen to the demand for milk at the grocery store? It's going to go down. Not because of the price, but because there's just less people buying it. Now, let's say all of a sudden you wake up one morning and wherever you live, and the population of your town has doubled for whatever reason. People moved in the middle of the night. And the next morning, they want breakfast. What are they going to go buy? They're going to go buy some milk. So what happened to the demand for milk? It increased. Not because of the price, but because there's just more people, now twice as many people, coming into Walmart to buy the milk. That's the phenomenon that creates an increase or decrease because of the number of buyers. Populations go down, demand goes down. When populations rise, demand rises. Simple as that. Okay, expectation about future prices. This is whenever you think price is going to go up, you're going to, or ideally, you're going to want to demand more of that because you want to take advantage of the low prices now. We've all gotten really good about listening to the news, and you hear that Saudi Arabia is going to lower their production, which we all know now means prices are going to go up. So we may go fill up our tank with gas real quick because we know the next morning, hearing this, prices may be on the rise, or vice versa. If you hear that they're going to be upping their production, okay, well, we can wait a couple of days. Prices will begin to drop because the supply of oil is there's going to be more on the market. Thus, you're going to hold off because you're expecting a lower price in the future. And we're going to also talk about the same phenomenon on the supply side of the graph. Okay, the next determinants of demand, or the non-price determinants of demand, is going to be substitutes and complements. Okay, we kind of touched on this earlier. I said we're going to dive deeper into that concept, and now here we are. Okay, so we have what we call, where before we had inferior goods and normal goods, now we have what we call related goods. Okay, these are going to be two different goods that are going to be somewhat connected to each other. One's going to be inverse, and one's going to be a positive relationship, but they're still connected nonetheless. So some will be substitutes and some will be complements. Okay, so substitutes, goods, services, or resources that are viewed as replacements for another. Simply put, when you see a price of something, you don't like that price, you can switch your demand for something else because it gives you the same outcome in the end. Kind of a great example of that would be juices. My kids love apple juice. Occasionally I go to the store and apple juice price is high. Well, guess what they're getting? They're not getting apple juice, they're going to get grape juice, they're going to get orange juice. Both are all three are juices. It gives you the same outcome in the end. You're drinking juice. So those are substitutes of each other. Okay, so here's another example of substitutes where you have the demand for Pepsi and you have the demand for Coca-Cola. So you walk into the store, you're thinking you're going to buy Pepsi, right? But lo and behold, the price of Pepsi has actually gone up. It's your price too. So price has increased along the demand curve. So you look over and, oh look, Coca-Cola is either on sale or let's just say it's the same price, but it's now cheaper than Pepsi. Most people are going to then shift, not everybody, you may be different, right? But again, we're talking in general. Most people are going to switch and say, well, you know what, they're both sodas. So I'm going to switch my demand and we're going to buy Coca-Cola. So you have a movement on the demand curve for Pepsi because it's a change in price, but you have a shift to the right because of the change in price and because there's both sodas making them substitutes of each other. You have a shift to the right for Coca-Cola. Like I've said before, if you've been on the Zoom calls, the study of economics is simply the study of choices. We make these choices every day. You think economically whether you realize it or not. And this is just a prime example. If you've ever switched your demand from one thing to another in response to price, you've lived out this phenomenon. All right. So next we have complements. And these are going to be goods or services that are going to be related to each other. Okay, a great example of that is peanut butter and jelly. And there's lots of different things we can talk about, but peanut butter and jelly is kind of that classic example. So if we look, when the price of one good, in this case peanut butter, changes, it does the same thing that our Pepsi did. It went up, right? We had price 1, now we have price 2, so we have an increase in price. So we're going to have a decrease in the demand for peanut butter. We're also going to have a decrease in the demand for jelly because we all know peanut butter and jelly go together. So if people are going to buy less peanut butter, they're not going to have necessarily a need for the jelly because they're not going to be making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches anymore, or at least for a while, or at least not as many, right? They might buy, instead of buying 2 of each bottle, now they're going to buy 1 of each bottle. That is still a decrease in the demand for both peanut butter and jelly. The reason that we have a shift for jelly is because we're having a decrease in the demand, not because of the price of the jelly itself, but because of the peanut butter. So this, even though we are talking about prices, and the same is true for the substitute example we just went through. The reason we call this a non-price determinant is because we're really looking at the demand for jelly, and we have a decrease in demand not because of the price of jelly itself, but because of the complement good, peanut butter. So this wraps up our lecture on demand. Next, we will be moving into supply.